I am going to share. So Mike had told us, if you were here listening to Claire and I chat, that he has a key apparently written down longhand somewhere, but he hasn't typed it up. So hopefully at some point we'll see that from Mike. But for today, it'd probably be useful to go back to do some Discover Life guide work. We'll be going through the male Megachile guide and Discover Life. So if you want to jump on that, that'll be good. And we'll be using both the guide and then I just use a second guide that I have loaded in a different tab that shows that has the has feature up so that we can look at what species are involved with different sets of these broad characters. So we're going through broad characters right now, and then we'll neck down to species-specific problem areas too. Okay, I'm going to share here, and we'll go to Discover Life Guides. And okay, Claire, are we seeing the Discover Life Guide now?
You got it.
All right, let's see. Let me go ahead and is it useful to up the visibility, right?
It would be a little bit, yes.
How do we do that? Is it Control plus, Shift plus, Control plus? Oh, there we go. Okay.
That's probably sufficient. Oh, go back one.
Okay. Okay.
There you go.
All right, that's better. Okay, so and then I'm going to do that to the second copy, which is Control plus here, and
Control minus that a little bit. I think it did it by itself.
Okay.
There you go. So just keep it like that.
All right. Okay. Okay. So Discover Life Guides, this is to the males. We're adding Midwestern stuff. I'm working with Mike on that. Most of you now have been here long enough. I don't need to cover a lot of the how-tos on this. But I am going to today emphasize that when we look at a character, for example, this character here, T6 center of segment covered in short, dense, suppressed hairs, we'll see that. But using Discover Life Guides, you can also get a sense. It's usually useful to see what the proportion of the states, here the states, or just simply no or yes, have been scored for having these species. So here we have the more common would be no hairs on T6, and the less common by about half with hairs. And you can tell by this green number, 15 here for yes and 34 for no. And just again, a reminder, some species are scored for both, which are the species that are ambiguous. And then you can go and instead of doing this in real time, clicking up here on has in the guide, I'm going to, which you would have gotten to by going to menu. Actually, it may have shown anyway, I'm not sure. But if we go here, I have clicked on has. And now if I go to that abdomen character, abdomen T6, I've got to find it, there we go. So we have the T6 character. Now I can actually look up what species have that. And this is useful if, for example, you want to go to your collection and look at examples of a feature that you haven't in the past, or you're at a museum and you want to pick up things. But I'm not sure what this box without the any words next to it is, but perhaps we'll click it later. Right now, I'm kind of constant. Oh, not. It's the not box because we've shifted the character size. So, but I usually don't bother with not. So that is useful if you're a logical thinking person, I suppose. But I'm going to concentrate on has here and only. So if we click on has, that it has hair on the segment, we see that 15 here show up again that we saw on the previous guide here. So there's 15. That makes a lot of sense. And so this is every species. The way to think about this is every species that is scored for having hair on T6 and pressed hairs if you read the whole entire segment. Now, though, a lot of times when I'm looking for examples, I'm not going to use has, I'm going to use only. And only means that here's a smaller set. Sometimes it's quite a bit smaller, and sometimes it's almost exactly the same. This is pretty close. So, and what this is telling me that these 12 species have been scored for having hair and have not been scored also for having no hair. So these are, for a way to talk about this is these are the best examples of specimens that in this case have hair on T6. And so I would normally use those, and I would not use the larger list of has on there, because some of those are ambiguous because they're scored for both. I hope that makes sense. So in this case, we're going back to only, and you can see there's a number here. This is a very clear character. That's why it's on the front of the guide. We'll go back here. When I can stay on this one, and I'll show you now a shot of Megachile brevis, and this is how it looks. It's not a very surprising thing. The ambiguous species have a less dense patch of hair here, where it's lightly covered with hair, or for whatever reason you might, if you look at it one way, it might be like, I think that would be no hair, and another way it would be having hair. And that's why the Discover Life guides are useful. You allow ambiguity, and you can expand the definitions of what a species has and doesn't have to include states. And you click on either the yes or the no, it's going to stay. So right now, I'm getting a message. Did we go offline?
You froze for just a moment, but you're back on.
Okay. So I had dropped. Is that what you're saying?
No, you had just like your screen and your voice had frozen for just a second.
Okay. So but you could hear my voice?
Yep, you're all good. Just keep going.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So Claire knows that my phone system is down. So yes, ping me like that on Teams or whatever it is, and that'll be a good indication that I'm just talking to myself. Okay.
Also,
so yeah.
I just want to put in here when we flip back to the Discover Life page, can you show users how to physically get to the has thing again through the menu links?
Okay. All right. Let's just go back there now. So if I just open a new tab, and I've got a link here, as I'm sure all of you do, to the ID guides section. And we're working on Megachile males. So there we go. And so now this is what you would see, and all the guides look the same. You don't see the has button over here at all, but if you simply click on menu, then it shows up. Now you can click on the has button, and you would get to exactly that second place. You can also use it. You can also be back at, you just use the back arrow or restart, but restarting would get you back immediately to a blank, let's call it guide. You can use those, and has still shows there. Let's see if we click yes. So, but has disappears as you start using the guide. So you would have to, again, click on the menu to get to has again. Does that make sense?
User confirms.
Okay, I'm going to delete these extra links, and I'm getting some weird tab up here that I want to move that is coming from, I think, Teams. That's odd. Why can I don't want it pinned. Can I unpin it? So the tabs that I want are hidden now by a weird little black control thing that seemingly, oh, there we go. Okay, it went away. I don't know why. So we're back in the game and we were looking at T6 covered. So I'm not going to show you the alternative state because it's just, there would be no hairs here. So this face on T6 is pretty obvious. So if we go to the next character in the guide, so here we are where we're looking at the abdomen, the upper side, and the pattern. We're really talking about the pattern of hair that's on the abdomen at that point. And there's 4 different states here, and we'll talk about each. So you can see that this first one with 40 is, and it even says most commonly occurring state. And then you have a number of lesser, fewer of characters that are obtained only by a few species. So in this first one, it's that basically you have white hair bands going across the specimen of some kind, and all those hairs are light. So you have a banding. Sometimes it's at the base, sometimes it's along the rim, but there's always banding. Sometimes the bands are broken. You only see the hair bands on the sides, and sometimes you see them go completely across. It's nothing I think that we need to see. I think we need to spend some time on the alternatives here. And we're going to flip now to our tab that has the has issues on, so we can look at what those species might be. Also, when using has, one common mistake, which I fall into all the time, is to leave an orphan only on some character that I was looking at. I clicked off this, and if I leave that on there, it messes things up later on. It's trying to do something that makes no sense, and your list of species is impacted. So we're going, though, to now go to our abdomen, and here we go. So here we are with this. So if we want to take a look at this one here, and we look at only, what we're looking at is a small list of species. You'll recognize these as the species, or most of the species, that have black scopal hairs. They also have different kinds in the females, and they also have different kinds of hair patterns in the males. So what we're looking at is a lack of obvious banding. In fact, they don't have hair bands. They have segments of the abdomen that are covered with hairs, some light and some dark, and that follows this pattern here. So mostly T1 and T2 have light hairs, and the remaining segments have dark hairs, and it has no distinct hair bands. So I've got a specimen here. Let me remove the friendly brevis, which we will certainly come back to and talk about all kinds of brevis features in terms of identify them, including the fact, which I should have shown you, that there were hairs on the rim of T5. Okay, so now I want to, what do I have here? I have Xyla, no, I have Musida out. So if we look at our Musida specimen, we're going to look at the hair patterns that are very different. And I want to drop the light level down on this. The traditional dirty specimen. So we break out of being in that view so that I can change the lighting. There we go. That's a little bit better. Okay, so what we see here is that, unlike in the other Megachile groups where there'd be distinct white hair bands across, I think anyone who's looked at any of specimens, they're much more common too, would see these. You can go online and see them. We're just not going to bother. But here you have light hairs and then dark hairs on light hairs on T1 and T2, no particular banding. They're just covered with white hairs and dark hairs here. That pattern repeats among these other black scopal haired groups. Not surprising since I believe they're all in the same subgenus. So that's that particular group. Then we come to another one which has really only one member. And sadly, I don't have the specimen. It's at the Smithsonian. I've got, well, specimens that I've gotten on various travels. This is tropical. In fact, it's African, I believe, maybe Indian subcontinent. Can't quite recall the story. And it's a world traveler. It nests in holes, apparently holes in old ships, because it's been here for well over 100 years. It inhabits the tip of Florida. I've seen it in the Keys, and it inhabits Hawaii and Cuba and Dominican Republic and the Caribbean countries of South America. So I'm not going to show you because I don't have it, but in this case, it's a very distinct T1 and T2 with really dense, very, nappy in some ways, yellowish orange hair, often clearly more towards the orange end of the spectrum, and then the remaining segments with a much lighter banding of also light colored hairs and dark bristles on T6. But it's one of those things when you see this specimen, you have something very different. And also in North America, you're really only going to run across it in very southern Florida. So this one, though, this next group here really only also has one member. So it's something that we would find in many species of bees, which is just got the abdomen has light colored hairs without any particular banding associated with them. But in Megachile, it's unusual because almost every other group has clear, very white hair bands running across the specimens. So in this particular one, this is, I'll turn this sideways too, is because this is hard to see. A lot of times, again, when you have relatively sparse light colored hairs, you don't see them well when you look straight down, but we'll turn this to its side. And you can see more that the entire, it's also one of these visual things where if we're looking at it online digitally, it doesn't show as well as under the microscope where you can bend the specimen back and forth to see. But what you're seeing here, it's a little bit difficult to pick up a lot of the hairs in between here, but it's basically doesn't have banding. They're not bright white. They tend to be tannish, and I don't think this is very particularly clear in this specimen. I'm going to bend it a little bit more, but it presents in most cases as not having any bands at all. Like I'm kind of surprised to see these bands down here because when I'm looking at it, this is all light colored hairs. So, oh, wait a minute, sorry. No wonder it's not presenting well because it's a female. Wait. Apologies. I have the male here. I thought I had it out. There it is. All right, let's redo this. Okay. Yeah, I don't look at I look at other things with the female, but so here, light colored hairs, it does seem to have some, maybe we have to score it for both, but it doesn't really have the same presentation. But now that I'm looking at it, you can make out, at least on here, some strengthening of the banding along the rims. But most of the rest of the hair here is all light colored hairs that are, again, when I'm looking at it under the microscope, it seems to be pretty clearly just all one big blob of blonde hairs. But now maybe I'm thinking, well, maybe I should go ahead because there's other features that this specimen has and score it for also having banded hairs, just to decrease the number of errors when keying things out. Okay, and the last one, all hair dark, no distinct hair bands. We really only have one species, which is something that I don't even know. I think this is one of the species that has shown up in Florida. Let's take a look here. But I don't know any recent records. Like, I've certainly not collected any. So if anyone knows of recent records of this species, let me know. It's not anything I'm familiar with, so we don't have any specimens, sadly. All right, so now that I've gone away, I'm going to go back to, there we go. We're back on the has area. So that covers the banding. Mostly what you're discriminating in the guide are the small little clade of species that, sorry, I'm looking for my specimen here. Small little clade of species that have something other than bright white hair bands going across the plane of the top of the abdomen. Okay, so if we go back here to the guide, the next area down for separating it has to do with the pattern of hair on the cheeks. So you can see again 33, 17, 16. So this is the largest category. And I should say that a lot of times if your specimens aren't prepared well, it's difficult to be absolutely confident that you can tell the differences here because the cheek hair, particularly towards the mandible, is often quite thick to begin with. And if it's matted down, it's like, well, maybe I can, maybe I can't see these furrows. So a lot of times I have to skip this just because the specimens are matted at that point. So if we go now back to the has area and go to, let's see, the head area, head distinct. Here we go. So this is one of the reasons that we have a pattern to the wording in Discover Life guides. So that we start with the largest feature head and then we go down the scale so that when you're looking at the alphabetization of the in the has character, you can find the character quickly, and also you can find the character from the links at the tops of the guide. So for example, if we go back here and go to the very top, here's all the links of everything that's showing on that key, and you can see all the head characters in one place, which is convenient because as you become more and more confident in your use of the guides, you'll often want to just go to one character because you know that it's got to be one of the species within that group. Okay, so back here, and we're on cheek thickness. If we go now to the has one, and so thickness of hair gradually increasing. If we look at only having that, it's quite an extensive list. Oops, I must have left something else on like this. See, this is where the problems come in. But you can still press any of the search buttons. So here we have a fairly long list. These are relatively common species, and we'll have thickness of hair. I think the brevis specimen here will do to show you a cheek pattern that is relatively uniform. Across its cheek. So it gradually, and this would be the case for, so always, as far as I know, hair on the cheek starts out thin towards the top of the eye here and then becomes thicker and thicker. Why? That's a good question. I have no idea. Towards the mandible. And in this case, it just gradually thickens. There's no sharp demarcation, nor is there these two furrows that we'll see in 1 second. So that's brevis. That's what you're seeing probably in 99% or maybe 95% of the specimens you get, because this is the common state among common species. Bring that back. We flip back here and we look at this character where we have both an abrupt shift and okay, there should be a bunch of specimens in there. I have left something.
You still have two things clicked on that same couplet.
Oh, do it. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so that's showing that, interestingly, Inimica is scored for both, probably. But now, thank you, Claire. Okay, now I have a list of species here that have this character, which is there's a abrupt shift from short hairs to long hairs, and there's these really cool little hairless furrow, which often shows up as 2 bars of hairs or 3 bars of hairs to either side. So let me show you a specimen of Frigida here, and also show you a secret Frigida character. But first, the cheek hairs. Spin this a little bit. Look on the other side too. Maybe I want to spin it a little bit. So you can see already the abruptness of the shift. And I want to show you that the hairless furrow is pretty obvious. But again, angling with your fingers is the way to go to see these characters. I'll look on the other side too. So here, thinner hairs, and then it also transitions usually to brighter white. So then there's the thicker and longer hairs, and then there's a furrow with no hairs. Why? I have no idea. And then there's another one prior to coming to another patch of thick hairs prior to coming to the mandible. And flipping to the other side, see what that offers us. We can see that these long hairs tend to be very goopy. Up, you don't see it, but let me just point out here, we're looking at a very massive mitten-like structure that is the expanded front tarsal segments, basotarsus, and covered in hairs, this mustachy thing here, running off in this direction, and bright yellow that is used during mating. And we'll come back to this because that's very useful. So many species do not have anything close to that in size, and some have seemingly no expanded ones at all. So Frigida has a character that I prepped the specimen to show you. That's very cool, but sometimes hard to see because it may be hard to see. They tend to fold up their legs unless they're spread out, but there are 2 on the inside or anterior edge, if you will, of the male front. I'm going to try and do this gently and place up my skills in a reverse world of There we go. Open this out a little bit. What we're going to be looking at, I'll use as a pointer, is the femur. And there's two black stripes inside there that, as far as I know, only, trying not to break it completely off, only Frigida has. Someone could tell me if that's not the case. Let's see if we can get a better view of this. Lovely Frigida specimen. How am I going to do this? Take that label off. Let me spin it upside down. Up. And I popped off a big chunk of that leg that I had loosened up. But did I leave the femur? It'd be very convenient. We did. Okay, so this is the non-impacted side. So you can see all this lovely expanded tarsal segments. And on the right, this section was gone, and on but the femur remains, and there's two dark stripes. I'm gonna shift this around a little bit, that show up there that you just don't see elsewhere. The most inconvenient problem, though, is that it's hard to see that specimen in a lot of, or see that feature in a lot of the specimens because of the way it's set up. So here we go. So there's these two interesting little cool stripes right there that I believe is the only species that having that. I'm not sure if that's listed anywhere. And Frigida is interesting to me. It's, I think, mostly associated, as one would suspect from the name, with far northern areas, but we saw a whole bunch from the big Brooklyn project in New York City, and I have no idea why they were there, but they were. So I kind of feel like it's one of the species that we should expect to expand its range and to take advantage of our habitations if it's in the middle of Brooklyn. Okay, so now we have specimens like this where it's just dramatically increased in density, but it's not, but it's doesn't have the furrows. So let me pull out what we got here. Oh, Xylocopoides, I've got that pulled out. So Xylocopoides is one of these species with all black scopal hairs in the female and has expanded, as you will see, front tarsal segments, and is all black in the females and is nearly so in the males, but it does have a bit more hair that is light colored. So let me bump this up. Take a look at the cheek here. And so here, what we're looking at, here's the cheek with very sparse hairs. And then all of a sudden, boom, you have all this long white hair right before the mandible. And no, there's no double furrows in there. The problem is, of course, that when the specimen is not super clean or is matted down, you would see that the hairs are matted there, so you wouldn't be sure whether a furrow was hidden by the matting. So that's where sometimes we can't use the specimens that we would like to use. All right, just checking, Claire, we're still all there, right? It's not just talking.
Still all there.
Okay, yeah.
We have some interesting conversations going on in the chat, but not, but we can kind of come back to them at the end of class.
Okay.
They're not character
Okay.
related.
Well, just
geography related.
Okay, well, you can remind me when, like, what time is it now? How much?
1:37.
1:37. Okay. All right. Well, just give me a heads up when you want us to wrap up. All right. So otherwise, we'll just keep going through the guide here. Sorry, I keep going back. These going through the Discover Life guides are often a little faster than going through Mike's guide because we don't do as many side conversations about how cool the different species are because we're looking at large characters that split them out. Okay, so those are the cheek hair pattern ones, and I'm clicking off the ones here. We are going to go back here. We'll revisit number of mandibular teeth at some point. So here, this is another good one that splits out an entire set of groups, which is on the legs of front coxy spine. So you can see here that most have a really well-developed spine on the front coxy. You can see those bumps right there on the pictures, but there is a group, 8 here in this particular case, that have those spines reduced. Now, they're not absolutely gone. In other words, there's not that the front coxa isn't just smooth, but they're very obviously demoted to something like bumps or with a little tubercle perhaps on top of it. So let's take a look at what species are involved there. And so we want to go to legs characters and front coxa. Okay, so if we look at only, well, we can go back and look at, here's this longer list, at a well-developed one, because I think our Frigida, busted Frigida one has a good example. Sometimes, again, depending on amount of hair that the specimen has, but often how fluffed the specimen has been during the drying process, it can be, and also the legs, curl up and all kinds of things. So sometimes it can be hard to see look at those 2 stripes, see these spurs here. So let me try and zoom in a bit. But and sometimes you can just find them with a pin. So here's one of these spines, and it's quite long, so I have to even change the focus a little bit to see them. Here's the base, and we'll talk about what's going on here. There's these little, in this particular species, these little CT down here at the bottom, these reddish CT in a very large number, and others will have different patterns. But here's the spine coming up from the front coxa. If you have a specimen that's not well washed or has just really long hair down in this area and is hiding it, you can take a pin and just rub it back and forth, and you should bump into that spine and be able to detect it. So this is the common state, to have this sort of spine going on. But there is a group that are associated with the species that have very reduced cutting edges on in the females, to mostly having none, and also have, yeah, I think they're all in the perhaps all in the same subgenus. So if we look at these, let me get an example here of Exilus, I believe. These have the reduced ones. And I just want to make sure that I put this last specimen away. It's label information on. Okay, Frigida is back, and now we are going to Exilus. Is that the proper way to pronounce its name? Okay, let's flip it over. And hopefully get a good shot of the underside and the front coxa. Again, sometimes difficult to see things here because it's pretty busy. So let's see if I can orient this a little bit better. Take a look here. Tarsal segments, and they're slightly expanded to being at least equal to the tibia behind here. That's another character that we'll see in a second. But we're trying to see, the problem is we're trying to see that into the area where the coxa is, so we can look for the lack of, so it would be this, here's the two coxa right here, and you can see there either is no spine or I think these are even hairs. Let's boost that up a little bit more. Or a very low bump, and that possibly is the little tubercle at the top. It could be, but it's nowhere near that dramatic size. So I think that this is the kind of thing you see, which is, you know, if we were looking at something that was completely flat, that definitely has projecting up above the surface. But in this particular case, in comparison to the other species, it's quite low. Let's see if I can turn this around. And, you know, the other problem is, of course, the pin is going right through there. And see if we can see anything else at a different angle. No. Let me get one more specimen out of Exilus and see if I can see that, because it's something that takes a little bit of practice. I can recall trying to do that myself to see. And
Well, if while you are looking, we can spend a little time with these other questions while you prep that.
okay.
Somebody wanted to know a little bit about the Big Brooklyn project, because that's where they live.
Huh?
And Sean observed that GBIF and INAT have Frigida common in the Rockies, New York, Canada, and the Desert Sky Islands.
Oh,
And Will has collected
they-
a couple of Frigida in the Puget Sound area.
okay. So it's around. Oh, this might be better. We still have the pin problem. In this case, the pin is going through there, but I think we have a bit of a better look at the coxal area. So maybe not great look. I'm going to up the lighting on this. Let's go to 200. Okay. And go back in here. Again, such a busy area, but when we look at this, there's yeah, you can't see any spine. That's the problem. The lack of the spine is much more problematic. There's the pin. Than seeing the spine itself. But I think the main point has been made that there is no obvious large spine coming out of the front coxa. The Brooklyn project, that's something that I did the identifications on for Jared Fowler, who was the person coordinating the effort. I'm going to say that I don't have perfect understanding, but I believe this was the project where they took let's call it an old dock area and converted it to some very fancy schmancy park with lots of native plants.
That's Brooklyn Bridge Park.
Okay. Is
that's what you're describing?
Not in Brooklyn?
Okay. No,
where?
Well, that's a long story that I'm happy to talk about another time, but yes, it's in Brooklyn.
Okay. All right. And does that make sense that it is filled with native plants and that people paid for some survey, and I was like, what are all these Frigida doing there?
Yeah, it's quite a refuge. A lot of really unusual species have been found there.
Mhm.
You can look it up on iNaturalist. The people are it's very heavily traveled and visited,
Oh,
and
good.
so there are a lot of observations from there. And I'll paste a link in the chat. It's a really interesting area to go looking for bugs.
I wonder if they have posted pictures of Frigida. So Frigida is kind of conspicuous, big. The males have those big flashy, front tarsal segments and stuff. So I don't know. I mean, so if anyone's interested, I can try. You just have to email me and harass me for it. But you can look it up on Discover Life on the mapping features. It's all there, but you have to look species by species. But I could try and pull all the specimens found there, which was 2 or 3 years ago. I think it was the year after they established it. And you could see if which of those show up also on iNaturalist. I can tell you that almost none of the lazy glossums are going to show up, but anyway, cool. And yeah, I'm sure there's other weird, cool sunflower bees or whatever else that might be showing up in Brooklyn Bridge Park. All right. All right, so I think we kind of got that. Long spines versus no spines or bump-like spines there. So when we're looking at tarsal color, this is pretty straightforward. We've already seen some examples of the pale yellow, big bright pale yellow. But the Exilus that we showed, where I was pointing out the expanded tarsal segment, that was somewhere between a pale color and a brown color, and it would be, well, let's just see. It should be scored for both here. So if we do has and dark, we can see that Exilus is there, and if we do has and pale, it is scored. And oh, maybe it's not scored there for both. I would have thought it was scored for both. Okay, anyway, maybe it was the other one. Now I want to go back and look at Exilus. So it says it was dark. Oops, where are my specimens? There we go. Maybe it was its counterpart. Or maybe I just need to score it for being pale too. Right, we're going back in. These talking about guides. It's also useful for me to look at specimens and reconsider some of the things. So we're looking at Exilus. It's too dark right now, but if I bump up the magnification, make it more approachable. So here are the segments. This is the back side, and one of the features is that they're relatively wide compared to what's its counterpart? It's named Campanuli, which I think is all dark. I think this needs to be scored for being pale. This is the back side, and the upper side is the other way. But in my mind, when looking at it, so I'm not using the guides, because that's one that is common enough. So, all right, I will score it for both. And now I am just talking to myself. Okay, so in any case, there are more specimens that are dark than light. And we can go back to the other guide here and take a look at color. So, well, there's quite a few that are scored for pale too. And so it's pretty straightforward, is whatever the color is going to be. But now I'm wondering about my Exilus scoring. So then the next one within the front page of the guide, which has things that are most useful, are the outline of the parallel medium ridge. So this requires a little bit of explanation. So let's pull up. Let's pull up perhaps brevis at this point as to what you're looking at, because there's a couple things going on here. One is that the dominant feature, let's pull up that brevis specimen again, I think. The dominant feature of the abdomen on T7 is a flange. And we go into detail in the explain, although I'm not sure people use the explain button that much. Okay, here we go. We have a male here. Yeah.
What species is that?
This is brevis. Okay, so what you're looking at here, under normal circumstances, you would say, okay, here's T7, and here's the rim of T7, right? So here's this notch. That's what we're talking about. Well, a lot of species have a notch in T7 the most. And brevis, you can see that brevis is a good one. You can see there's a bunch of teeth here. So we have another character there's no distinct notch, but it's jagged, like there's projections and things. And then the last one, which we'll also see, is that the tip is quite different, but it's not of the rim. So what we're looking at is not the rim, but a flange above the rim. So here, and I'll shift now the perspective. So theoretically, you can see both the rim and this flange, because the rim is also useful. So in terms of characters, but now we'll see them later. They're a little bit more, probably another day, a little trickier to visit. So to see the true rim, you have to flip the specimen over. So now, remember, here's the character. These are the hairs that are oppressed and show up on the top of the dorsal part of T7. This is the flange, the edge of the flange that we're looking at is notch. There's the notch with an oblique angle. I'm going to change the focus. So there we go. So here's what looked like the rim. Okay, it's right there. But this is actually not the true rim. It's just a flange above the rim. So this is the true rim down here. And we're looking at it straight on, so we can't see some of the characters that we're going to look at. But this true rim here has teeth on some species and no teeth on others, and they're small. Like that's a tooth right there. I'm not expecting you to see these. They're not in a good vision, but people who start out working on Megachile spend a lot of time trying to look at these and find these teeth here. But I think the important first step here is to know that this big feature, this dominant feature, is not the rim, it's this flange. And when we talk about that, the ridge there, yeah, so it's not the true rim, but we try to make that distinction. So we were looking at the notch part, so that was pretty clear. So let's look at, and we talked about the jagged. It turns out when we flip over here to, oops, one more. If we go to abdomen, back to this character, hopefully I got rid of everything else. We look at that only has, well, we can look at all of them. That only has these. There's a list, and then there's a list of what are, oops, I must have something else, maybe not listed there, I think. No, maybe not. Rotundata relativa. Yeah, hang on. I've got a orphan check mark somewhere because that list looks incorrect. Up, look at that. Bad. Okay, back to our list here for, yeah. So if we look at what, now this will be a more complete list. So most species have this divot out. There's a group of species here that, when we look at the onlys, has a convex one. If you look at this list and you know anything about distributions, these are all, with the exception of Sculpturalis, really rare species. So these are species that either have only one or two or have never seen, with the exception of ruby, which I just ran into a plot of them in the sandhills. So, which is interesting. I think a lot of these are specialists, and I think a lot of the life history isn't well known either. Megachile sculpturalis is an introduced species, so it's been around for now about 20 years, and it's becoming quite common, takes over carpenter bee nests. So let's take a look at ruby. This is a character that is nicely obvious. I'm going to take out our brevis specimen again. How are we doing for time, Claire?
It's 1:59, but I have
Okay.
nothing going on after this, so
All right. Well, I'll show
Someone
this, and then we'll stop and we can take questions if there are any.
okay.
All right. So, and because there's more to do, like with the females for all these things. So here is, let me just turn this a little bit more. Make kind of ruby. Wait, is this a male or a female? Okay, it is a male. Such a bizarrely different species group than all the others. All right, so we're looking at T6. Here's the flange. We're not going to look underneath it for the true rim, but if you recall on the other one, it's a wider, and it has a clear notch in the middle. This is the opposite, so it's convex, and it's pretty much got a smooth outline, and there's no sense of a divot or anything in there. So that's a nice character. That's why these are all on the front page. These are characters that usually are relatively obvious, separate out big groups, and after a while you learn, when you scan your specimen after first looking at it, like, oh my gosh, that's that group that has the convex flange on T7. So I'm going to go right there and jump to that to start my ID process. So just go to the guide. So yeah, just to talk about that in a way. So after a while, you begin to understand and memorize at least these character groups and go like, oh, that's an unusual. You look at your specimen and go like, oh, that's that unusual T6 thing. And instead of trying to answer all the questions above, although you almost always would put in what region you're working in, you could then just scroll right down to this rounded one, and you just lopped off a whole bunch of specimens. I put in a city too, in Maryland for whatever reason. Uh-oh, I'm wondering if I'm running into some bandwidth problems here. Claire, are you still there?
Yep, we're still here.
Okay. I'm not sure why Discover Life is not sending me back a list of species. So maybe it's on Discover Life. Anyway, I'll stop there and see if there's any questions.
Nothing in the chat so far, but feel free to unmute.
Oh, Claire, do you have anything? I might be locked up here. Do you have anything to say regarding the talks and Dan's website? Is it all back up and the same as it was?
Yep, everything seems to be back up. I think maybe we didn't get Dan and I didn't get the last videos up, but after what I pushed today, after I download this, we should be up to date on that, and I think also the transcripts will be there somewhere.
Yeah, it looks like my my Chrome froze up, so can't see anything more. But anyway, I just emphasize the facile nature of these matrix guides, unlike the step-by-step process in a lot of the traditional dichotomous keys. Well,
Yeah, no questions.
doesn't sound like there's anything else to talk about.
Nope, but maybe next week we'll have Mike back, we'll have a key, and maybe we can we'll get to return to some of those characteristics that you were doing here and whatever stuff Mike always throws in.
Right. Yeah, no, he's lovely in that he's often taking very different approaches, and so we'll be incorporating a lot of his couplets for species back into Discover Life guides, which is again a nice thing that you can just throw a character in whenever you want. And as usual, I would just say, if you have any observations like, oh, I think this scoring is incorrect or needs to be expanded, let us know and we can make those changes too.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
We'll see you all next week.
All right. Thanks, Claire. Bye, everybody.